Hello everyone, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm really delighted to be here at another CEDA event. It's one that I thoroughly enjoy every time. I want to give my acknowledgements to the Wurundjeri people who are traditional owners of this land, and I want to acknowledge the fact that Victoria, the Victorian government, the Victorian people are on a journey to achieving treaty and treaties with our First Peoples. And that is something that we have committed to now for some time, and we will see it through. And if you like, I think part of the energy transition presents some really important opportunities for Victorian government to demonstrate its commitment to treaty through many different ways that the economic benefit can be achieved for many First Peoples. But there are, of course, always challenges with these things as we continue to grow what is a really important set of projects that need to be delivered to achieve our end goal, which is, of course, to decarbonise our energy system. I do want to acknowledge and thank CEDA and the CEO, Melinda Salento, for the invitation and to all guests being here. And certainly the outlook for Victoria's energy market is bright, and much like our broader economy, and I think these things are important for us to always remember. Deloitte Access Economics forecasts Victoria's economic growth will lead all states over the 5 years to 27-28 at an average annual rate of 2.3%. And underpinning this strong growth is our energy transition that will deliver affordable, reliable and secure renewable electricity for all Victorians. And the energy transition will also drive the achievement of our ambitious climate targets for reducing emissions by between 28 and 33% by 2025 and 75 to 80% by 2035 and net zero emissions by 2045. But we know, of course, that it is an enormous undertaking, and as we get closer to these dates, things do get harder, and we have to be prepared for that, and we have to make sure that we have the right ingredients of this secret sauce that Clint talked about, because we need to get it right, and we need to ensure that we don't leave people behind. We're effectively transforming our electricity system and the economy in a process that had its beginnings almost 2 decades ago in Victoria and has roughly that much further still to go. It requires around 28 gigawatt of new capacity to be built by 2035. Roughly a quarter of that is behind the meter. So think about that. That is really critical to understand the role that the small-scale renewables will play. It is an enormous undertaking. To give confidence to the public and investors about how we will achieve this, we've legislated a comprehensive set of targets. These give enormous clarity and transparency about our decarbonisation plans. They're not targets just for the sake of them. We measure ourselves against them, and we design our policies and programs to deliver on those targets accordingly. These targets that I've just mentioned include 65% renewable electricity by 2030 and 95% by 2035, at least 2.6 gigawatts of energy storage targets by 2030 and at least 6.3 gigawatts by 2035. And of course there's a mix in there about short duration, long-term duration and the like. We've also legislated 2 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2032, 4 gigawatts by 35 and 9 gigawatts by 2040. We here in Victoria are well on the way to meeting these targets thanks to 4.2 gigawatts of new large-scale renewable energy from the 59 different projects that have been commissioned to date in Victoria. Victoria's renewable electricity generation rose to more than 39% across last year, and it was about just under 11% when we first came to office. So we've gone from just under 11% at the end of 2014 to more than 39% throughout the course of last year. These things don't happen by accident. So it's no surprise that Victoria's emissions have also fallen quite significantly to more than 30%, by more than 30% I should say, and that is one of the fastest rates of decarbonisation of any comparable jurisdiction. Now, we know Victoria has historically had one of the most carbon-intensive economies in the world. But rather than seeing that as an excuse to do nothing or very little, we've embraced it as an opportunity to strive for leadership. We have to do it. We've done this while keeping Victoria's electricity costs more than competitive. Wholesale electricity prices in Victoria have consistently been the lowest or closest to the lowest each year for the last 4 years. And futures contracts have Victoria at least $20 per megawatt hour lower than our nearest competitor, Queensland, in the latest AEMO Quarterly Energy Dynamics report. So our price advantage will only grow. Premier Allen has recognised that along with Victoria's transport and housing big builds is the renewables big build, and she's not wrong. Our government is committed to ensuring the ongoing affordability, reliability and sustainability of Victoria's electricity system, not in spite of the transition to renewables, but as a result of it. And that's an inescapable truth. The inescapable fact also is that our coal-fired power plants are ageing and need to be retired, and we know that there are plans in place for many of them to do just that. So we have adopted a pragmatic position. By 2035, we will have 95% of our electricity coming from renewable energy in state, because these technologies are the cheapest forms of new build electricity generation. And of course, they are also the fastest to build. But obviously, the other 5% will be non-renewables. It will be gas peakers, roughly the same level of fossil gas peaking as we use in Victoria today to make electricity. There's no dogma here. It's about what works. Obviously, gas-fired power is expensive and comes with carbon emissions. So we need to minimise its use as much as practicable, but there is still an important role for it to play. Similarly, the transition doesn't work without private sector investment, and lots of it. And we're putting in place clear statutory and policy frameworks to de-risk that investment. However, strategic government participation in energy investment can also improve outcomes for consumers, and it needs to do that. And that's why we have brought back the SEC. And I'm pleased that we have Chris Miller here today, who will speak about this soon, so I won't speak too much on this, other than to say that the SEC's critical role is to accelerate investment in 4.5 gigawatts of new renewable energy and storage projects. Bringing on more renewable capacity faster means lower bills for consumers. It's that simple also, although some people work hard not to see it. And I call that out. And people who've known me for a long time, I don't mince words. I like to think that I speak facts, and I think it's always important that we remind ourselves of those facts, regardless of the debates that sometimes come up that can sometimes be about creating more myths than facts. Being pragmatic also means recognising that a power grid dominated by renewables must be diverse, which is why we are Australia's leaders in offshore wind. It's not a nice to have, it's essential to providing the generation capacity we will need into the 2030s and the 40s. All this new capacity is simply not feasible without expanding and modernising our transport and transmission network. And that's why we have created VicGrid, a government agency that will look after the planning of transmission infrastructure. Now, it has been decades since we built major transmission infrastructure in Victoria, and the old ways of doing it are not appropriate today. We need a transmission planner that ensures the hosting capacity is in place before it is needed. Anticipatory investment, anticipatory planning and investment is absolutely critical. We need community engagement that happens up front and not at the end of the process. So we're overhauling the planning and approvals process through the introduction of the Victorian Transmission Investment Framework. In all these areas, we are committing to working with traditional owners in new ways that supports their self-determination and enables benefit sharing into the future. We will also continue working with the Commonwealth on the Capacity Investment Scheme to ensure it complements our approach here in Victoria. That's a very quick look at the utility scale end of the electricity market, but a lot of really critical changes are happening right down the other end, behind the meter, in homes and in businesses. Which brings me to the topic of gas. And I'm proud that Victoria is doing the hard work to address our heavy reliance on fossil gas through the gas substitution roadmap and its updates. The Victorian Government is the only political actor with a pragmatic gas policy. The opposition want to pretend that we're living in the past, and the Greens want to skip ahead to the future, and neither want to deal with the facts that we face today. We've got to manage this. The facts are that our once cheap and plentiful sources of fossil gas are now fast declining and increasingly expensive. New gas production in Victoria won't happen at sufficient scale or speed to change the overall trajectory of the sector. This is because of geology, not ideology. Geology. But we need to also acknowledge that change will take time and be difficult for some current gas users. So what is the sensible response to these facts? Pragmatism dictates that we look at each segment of gas users individually and do what makes sense for them. For households, the evidence is overwhelming. All electric homes are now cheaper to run than dual fuel homes. That hasn't always been true, but it is now and will be into the future. A significant number of our businesses will also find electrification makes economic sense for them. We're supporting pilots and trials of renewable gases, such as biomethane or renewable hydrogen, which provide a substitution pathway for some business and industry. But as we've always said, there are some gas users who simply need to continue using gas for the foreseeable future. This includes industries using fossil gas as feedstock or for high heat applications. And then there are others for whom economically swap outs may not necessarily be appropriate for them at this particular time. But even in those cases, the gas substitution agenda will help them by assisting those who can switch away from fossil gas. We free up supplies for those who need to keep using it. Again, it's the pragmatics of it. Pretending that there is some plentiful source of conventional gas that has been locked up by the government is a myth. There is no ban on conventional onshore or offshore gas exploration on Victorian land or in Victorian waters. Taken together, it's hard to see a more pragmatic approach. Of course, phasing down our use of fossil gas will take many years. It is a journey. And as the Australian Energy Market Operator identified, there are significant challenges to East Coast gas market supply from as early as 2028 and onwards. A sensible response would address supply risks while avoiding creating expensive stranded assets like major new pipelines. Gas import terminals can meet these needs under the right circumstances, and we have an open mind. But a terminal would need to meet all of Victoria's rigorous planning and environmental requirements for major infrastructure. Now, it might seem incongruous that we need new supplies of gas while we transition away from fossil gas use, but it's simple mathematics. The rate of decline in gas production is faster than the current rate of demand reduction, so some additional interim supplies will be needed to maintain the balance. They are the facts. We take that seriously, and that's why we have supported the current 5 offshore and 9 onshore exploration permits to search for new sources of conventional gas in Victoria. That's a fact. With a transformation this big, there will be enormous demand for workers, skills and a robust supply chain. To address this, we are developing the Victorian Energy Jobs Plan, which identifies the skills and training needed to support Victoria's renewable energy industries. We've estimated that there will be 59,000 jobs created in the transition to 95% renewable electricity by 2035, and this is a huge challenge and opportunity. There are a lot of challenges and it won't be easy, but I am immensely optimistic about what we can achieve when we work closely with local communities, investors, industry and of course traditional owners. We will keep doing what needs to be done. We'll ignore distractions and pipe dreams, we'll deal with the facts and we'll always put the Victorian public first. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I've probably gone a bit over time, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you again.